Hollywood's golden age shimmered with glamour, but behind the scenes, many actresses were subjected to the infamous casting couch. Those who refused to be nice often paid a heavy price, getting blacklisted, losing roles, or watching their careers quietly disappear. Today, we'll reveal 15 brave actresses who stood their ground. Some vanished completely, and number 1 will truly surprise you. Maureen O'Hara. Maureen O'Hara, the Irish-born star of Miracle on 34th Street and The Quiet Man, publicly railed against Hollywood's physical predation as early as 1945. At just 25, O'Hara said she was ready to quit Hollywood after fending off daily advances. Producers and directors, angered by her refusal to let them kiss or grope her, started a vicious whisper campaign that she was frigid. A cold piece of marble statuary, O'Hara recalled. In contemporary interviews, she recounted being called a cold potato without gender appeal, simply because she wouldn't let them paw me. Studio bigwigs spread rumors questioning her womanhood as retaliation for rejecting them. Decades later, O'Hara never regretted taking a stand. "I wouldn't throw myself on the casting couch, and I know that cost me parts," she said in 2004, steadfast that "I wasn't going to play the whore." Though O'Hara maintained a successful career, she believed she lost numerous roles for staying true to her principles. A real price paid for integrity in an era of rampant harassment. Shirley Temple. Even child actors were not safe from Hollywood's predators. Shirley Temple was just 12 years old when she met famed MGM producer Arthur Freed in 1940, and he promptly unzipped his trousers and exposed himself to the little girl. Temple recalled bursting into nervous laughter, which offended the producer. He threw her out of his office in anger. According to Temple's autobiography, Freed was notorious for his adventuresome casting couch, and he targeted the pre-teen Temple during what was supposed to be a business meeting. Shocked and repulsed, Temple did not comply, and shortly after, her MGM contract was not renewed. As an adolescent, Temple struggled to transition into grown-up roles and soon left the film industry altogether. While other factors played a role, it's clear Temple's refusal to be exploited by powerful men marked the end of her innocence in Hollywood. Her experience underscores that physical harassment in the Golden Age spared no one, not even the most beloved child star in America. Joan Collins. Before she was a TV icon on Dynasty, Joan Collins was a young star in 1950s Hollywood, and one of the few to openly admit she lost a coveted role for rebuffing a studio boss. Collins had been the front-runner to star in Cleopatra. She says the head of 20th Century Fox, Buddy Adler, invited her to his office regarding the part. "You really want this role? All you have to do is be nice to me," Adler told her. Be nice, being a thinly veiled demand for getting laid. Collins recalls that she couldn't do that. Overwhelmed, she burst into tears and ran out of his office. As a result, Collins missed out on the lead in Cleopatra because she refused to be nice to the studio chief. Marilyn Monroe had even warned Collins to beware of Hollywood wolves who prowled for young actresses. Collins's refusal cost her arguably the biggest role of her career. It was a punishment for preserving her dignity, and she would later speak out so that new generations understood the abuse women of her era endured in silence. Judy Garland. Judy Garland was one of MGM's brightest stars in the 1930s and 40s, but behind the scenes, she suffered routine harassment, even as a teenager. In his biography of Garland, Gerald Clark documents that studio bigwigs at MGM propositioned the young actress for favor. The most notorious offender was Louis B. Mayer, the all-powerful head of MGM, who had essentially adopted Garland as a child prodigy. Mayer would praise Judy's singing, telling her she sang from the heart, all while gripping her left breast during the conversation. Garland was just 16 years old during some of these incidents. She felt she had no choice but to endure the humiliation. The trauma of this abuse, combined with the studio's incessant demands, they gave her pills to control her weight and energy, took a severe toll. Garland later said she confronted Mayer about his molestation when she was older, which enraged him. Not long after, in 1950, MGM fired Garland, officially due to unreliability. But by then, the once compliant star had begun rebelling against studio control. While not blacklisted in the traditional sense, Garland's outspokenness and refusal to tolerate abuse coincided with the collapse of her studio career. Her story illustrates how the power imbalance allowed men like Mayer to make or break even a top star's career in retaliation for rejection. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth was Columbia Pictures' top star of the 1940s, famously dubbed the Love Goddess. Yet even she was not immune to pressure from the studio's tyrannical boss, Harry Cohn, a man known for running Hollywood's most notorious casting couch. Biographies reveal that Cohn had an unhealthy obsession with Hayworth. Early in her career, her first husband, whom Orson Welles described as literally a pimp, set up a meeting between Hayworth and Cohn, hoping to secure her big break. On a private yacht, Cohn expected physical favors, but Hayworth refused to sleep with Cohn. It was a red line she would not cross. Cohn never forgot the snub. He carried a long and bitter grudge against Hayworth, bullying her relentlessly during her years under contract. At one point, Cohn even fined Hayworth for insubordination, punishing her for not obeying his personal demands. Though she became Columbia's biggest female star, Hayworth had to endure Cohn's vindictiveness, including invasive control over her personal life, as retaliation for rejecting him. The strain contributed to her eventually fleeing Hollywood. Hayworth later lamented how men fell in love with her on-screen persona, but woke up with me, a real woman who would not be exploited. Her story underscores that even superstardom couldn't fully shield a woman from retribution if she dared defy a mogul's lust. Kim Novak. Kim Novak was one of the last big studio-manufactured stars, groomed in the 1950s by Columbia's Harry Cohn to be the next Rita Hayworth. Cohn micromanaged Novak's image, changing her name, hair, and weight, and he expected total obedience. But Novak quietly pushed back. She famously refused one of Cohn's early demands, insisting on keeping a semblance of her identity. More importantly, Novak resisted Cohn's advances. According to Vanity Fair, she managed to evade Cohn's casting couch, considered the most notorious in Hollywood. Cohn did not take rejection lightly. When Novak later began dating singer Sammy Davis Jr., Cohn was enraged on multiple levels, seeing it as both a personal affront and a threat to Novak's box office appeal in segregated 1957 Hollywood. The studio chief resorted to extreme measures. He had Novak followed by private investigators and even enlisted mob-associated contacts to intimidate Davis into breaking off the romance. Novak's refusal to submit to Cohn's control meant she lived under surveillance and intimidation. Remarkably, Novak still thrived, starring in classics like Vertigo, but the stress contributed to her stepping away from Hollywood in the 1960s while still in her prime. Her case is a rare example of a star who stood up to a predator and kept her career, though not without personal cost. Ginger Rogers. By the 1940s, Ginger Rogers was an Academy Award-winning actress and Fred Astaire's famous dance partner. But even an Oscar didn't spare her from the casting couch gauntlet. Rogers revealed that during a meeting at Columbia Pictures, Studio boss Harry Cohn chased her around his desk, making passes at her. The married Rogers was appalled and firmly said no. "I don't want to discuss this," she told Cohn, and she fled the office before things went further, as recounted in her memoir. Her refusal infuriated Cohn. After that incident, Rogers limited her work at Columbia, effectively self-blacklisting from a studio where she didn't feel safe. She found roles elsewhere, but the encounter remained a traumatic memory. In public, Rogers was careful when talking about it, fearing reprisals. Only years later did she confirm the story that Cohn had cornered and harassed her in his office, and that she'd narrowly escaped. Ginger Rogers' experience, running from a predatory studio head, was sadly common. Many actresses knew that resisting such meetings could mean being branded difficult and losing work. Rogers had enough clout to continue her career, but her principled stand meant avoiding an entire studio to steer clear of one powerful harasser. Rita Moreno. Rita Moreno arrived in Hollywood as a teenage ingenue in the early 1950s, and she quickly encountered the industry's dark side. Moreno has indicated that at age 19 she had to fend off the advances of 20th Century Fox production chief Buddy Adler. Adler, the same executive who tried to coerce Joan Collins, reportedly harassed the young Moreno while she was under contract at Fox. Moreno resisted his propositions, a brave move for a virtually unknown actress of color in that era. The consequences were career-altering. Fox only gave Moreno minor roles, often stereotypical island girl parts, and declined to renew her contract just as she was gaining notice. She later realized that refusing Adler's casting couch likely derailed any chance of stardom at Fox. For most of the 50s, Moreno struggled to break free of bit parts, despite her talent. Only years later, with a role in West Side Story, did she finally get to shine. But by then, she had left the studio system behind. In interviews, Moreno has recalled how common it was for powerful men to force themselves on young actresses, and how those who didn't comply were punished with stalled careers. Her own early experiences exemplify how Hollywood's systemic favorism especially hurt women of color, who had even less recourse. Moreno ultimately triumphed, becoming one of the first Latinas to win an Oscar. But the road was far longer and harder because she said no to a predator at the start. Linda Darnell. Linda Darnell was a rising star at 20th Century Fox in the 1940s, until she refused the studio chief's physical advances. Darnell's beauty drew the attentions of Fox honcho Darrell F. Zanuck, a man infamous for afternoon trysts with actresses. As she got older, Zanuck's pursuit became more aggressive, but Darnell wanted no part of the couch. When she continued to reject his advances, he responded by standing in the way of her career. Studio records confirm that Darnell was rejected for a film role because she refused to respond to Zanuck's advances. After spurning him, she suddenly lost out on plum parts and was cast only in mediocre films she hated. By 1943, Darnell's once promising career was in a tailspin. She was even put on suspension by Fox, an internal form of blacklisting, for not cooperating with studio demands. The ultimate blow came when Darnell secretly married a cameraman. Zanuck, furious that she placed her personal life over him, lost interest in her and stopped promoting her altogether. Darnell went from starring roles to second leads, then to being dropped by the studio while still in her 20s. The official excuses cited age or weight, but insiders knew the truth. She had defied the boss. Linda Darnell's tragedy was not just that she fell from fame, but that her fall was orchestrated in retaliation for protecting her dignity. Tippi Hedrin. In the 1960s, model-turned-actress Tippi Hedrin became Alfred Hitchcock's newest discovery and the star of The Birds, 1963. But Hitchcock's professional mentorship veered into obsession. Hedrin revealed that the famed director subjected her to relentless harassment, including groping and lewd advances in his office and limo. On one occasion, Hedrin fought him off as he tried to force himself on her. The more she resisted, the more aggressive he became, until she finally pushed him away. Enraged at being rejected, Hitchcock swore vengeance. Hedrin recalls Hitchcock looking her in the eye and coldly promising, "I'll ruin your career." Sadly, he did exactly that. After she fulfilled her contract by starring in Marnie, 1964, Hitchcock prevented her from taking any other acting jobs while he still had her under contract. He refused to release her for projects, effectively blacklisting Hedrin in Hollywood during what should have been the peak of her career. "He kept me under contract, paid me to do nothing for over 2 years," Hedrin has said, describing it as a draconian punishment for rebuffing him. Only when Hitchcock's contract on her lapsed could she slowly resume work, but the momentum was lost. Tippi Hedrin's ordeal, from assault to career retaliation, remained one of Hollywood's most disturbing open secrets for decades. Her story, which she courageously made public years later, epitomizes how speaking up against a powerful abuser often meant professional exile in the studio era. Jean Arthur. Jean Arthur was a popular leading lady of the 1930s, known for her sunny voice and comedic charm. Yet at the height of her fame, in the mid-1940s, Arthur abruptly quit the film business, largely to get away from Columbia's predatory chief, Harry Cohn. According to author Richard Givens, Arthur confided that when she was under contract at Columbia, Cohn would use a secret back door to sneak into actresses' dressing rooms and force himself on them in a dark hallway. Jean Arthur was so terrorized that she hatched a desperate plan. She brought a gun to the studio and considered shooting Harry Cohn to protect herself and others. Ultimately, she couldn't go through with violence. Instead, she decided to quit the business entirely rather than endure further abuse. By 1945, at just 45 years old, Arthur walked away from Hollywood, apart from one final film years later. In doing so, she sacrificed millions in earnings and future stardom. Few knew the real reason at the time. Publicly, it was spun as her being reclusive or difficult. But as colleagues later revealed, Arthur's moral courage in refusing Cohn's advances meant relinquishing a career she loved. Her exit speaks volumes. For some, the only escape from the casting coach was to leave Hollywood forever, depriving audiences of untold talent and cutting short the careers of women who dared demand respect. Louise Brooks. Louise Brooks, a silent film star of the 1920s, famed for her bobbed hair and rebellious streak, became one of the first actresses to publicly critique Hollywood's sexual barter system. At a time when few dared breathe a word, Brooks wrote candidly about how screen tests and movie contracts were handed out via the casting couch to women who slept with powerful men at private parties. She personally witnessed a young dancer accompany a British press baron into a hotel room. A few days later, she had a contract at MGM, Brooks noted wryly. Brooks herself refused to play that game. Disgusted by these practices, she defied studio bosses and even walked out on her Paramount contract in 1928 rather than bow to exploitative demands. Her outspokenness and unwillingness to be friendly with executives earned her a reputation for being difficult. By 1930, the studios had effectively blacklisted Brooks. No major company would hire her, and this enormously talented actress was forced into European films and eventual obscurity. Hollywood columnist Hubbard Keevy later remarked that Brooks had a lot of courage, but stepped on the toes of giants. In her writings, Brooks presciently observed that once producers realized independent women could be stars, they waged a concerted war on the star system, using physical domination as one tool to keep actresses in line. Brooks's career was an early casualty of that war. She sacrificed her livelihood to maintain her self-respect, leaving behind a cautionary tale of a woman far ahead of her time who called out Hollywood's ugliness long before it was fashionable to do so. Senta Berger. By the 1960s, one might think Hollywood's lecherous old guard was fading. But European actress Senta Berger discovered otherwise in 1965 when she had a horrifying encounter with Darrell F. Zanuck, the same Fox studio titan who'd tormented Linda Darnell decades earlier. Berger met Zanuck in a New York hotel suite to discuss her prospects. There, the former mogul suddenly exposed himself from beneath a silk dressing gown. Incredibly, Zanuck told the young Austrian actress that if she slept with him, he would forgive her for the atrocities of the Nazis, a grotesque and absurd proposition. Berger was appalled and immediately refused. Fearing what he might do, she left the situation as fast as she could. After that incident, Berger decided Hollywood was not for her. She soon returned to Europe, opting to continue her career in foreign films rather than tolerate the depravity she had witnessed. In interviews, Berger confirmed the story and expressed her shock that such abuse of power was still happening. Her decision meant turning down a crack at Hollywood stardom, illustrating that for many foreign actresses, the casting couch was a barrier that made the American dream more of a nightmare. Senta Berger's ordeal, coming at the tail end of the Golden Age, shows how deeply ingrained this predatory culture was, spanning generations of studio men, some of whom kept preying on actresses long after their official reign had ended. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe, the ultimate 1950s beauty symbol, privately fought against Hollywood's predatory culture. She once described Hollywood as an overcrowded brothel, bluntly acknowledging what many starlets had to do for roles. In biographer Anthony Summers's account, Monroe even quipped that she had spent a great deal of time on my knees early in her career. Rather than submit, Monroe walked out of various interviews and situations that she deemed inappropriate, according to author Michelle Morgan. In the mid-1950s, Monroe boldly spoke in press interviews about being harassed by an unnamed executive, inspiring others by refusing to stay silent. She was never going to let herself be victimized, Morgan notes, adding that Monroe's outspokenness made her one of the only actresses of her era to openly condemn the casting couch. Although Monroe eventually became a superstar, she believed her refusal to play along slowed her early progress. As she told a friend, in Hollywood, if you didn't go along, there were 25 girls who would. Her courage in calling out the wolves of Hollywood was virtually unprecedented at the time, and it hinted at the hidden abuses faced by less famous women.